Okay, good evening, everyone. This week's Parsha is Parshas Nasso. Our learning tonight should be a schus and merit for a refuah shalema for all of us who are ill. It should be a merit that we should be rescued and delivered from this very difficult situation with COVID-19, and that we should see shalom, we should see peace in the streets of our country. Okay, so the last third of this week's parsha, that's like the last third of the parsha, deals with the Chanukas HaMizbeach. The Mishkan, the tabernacle, was completed, and the Nesiim, the princes of each tribe, brought a gift. First, together they brought a gift, and then they brought gifts separately as representative of their tribe. And Perek Zayin Pasuk Aleph is where, chapter 7, verse 1 is where this all begins. And it reads, Vayhi b'yom kalos Moshe lakimas hamishkan. Was on the day that Moshe finished erecting the tabernacle. Vayimshach oisai, he anointed it with oil. Vayikadosh oisai v'eskol kelav, he sanctified it and all its vessels. V'samizbeach v'eskol kelav, and the altar and all its vessels. He anointed them by Kadesh, somebody sanctified them. So Rashi asks a very interesting question on the words, the first few words where it says, Vahi b'yom kalos Moshe. It was on the day that Moshe finished erecting the Mishkan. Rashi says, that means it's like this. The ones who actually constructed the Mishkan was a team of craftsmen led by two men, one named Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur, Betzalel from the tribe of Yehuda, who was Moshe Rabbeinu's nephew, and Aholiav ben Achisamach, another man, Aholiav, from the tribe of Dan. They were the head craftsmen, and they had a whole team working with them. And Moshe told them what to do, but they were the ones who did the actual building. They put it all together. So Rashi is bothered by the fact that Moshe seems to be getting all the credit. It says on the day that Moshe erected the Mishkan, and the question is that we know that Betzalel and Eliav and their team, they also were involved in setting up the Mishkan. So what happened to them? Why is only Moshe Rabbeinu being mentioned? And therefore Rashi says, because Moshe devoted himself. Literally, it means he sacrificed of himself. He devoted himself in a very intense way. He was practicing what we call self-sacrifice for what he was involved in the construction of the Mishkan. Because of the fact that he gave up from himself in a very high level of devotion. Moshe Rabbeinu made sure that which he had seen on Mount Sinai, when God gave Moshe the Torah on Mount Sinai, he also taught Moshe what will the Mishkan look like, every detail. The detail of the structure itself, of all the vessels. Moshe was shown all those things, and Moshe gave up from himself. Moshe sacrificed himself to see that the form of each thing, as he saw it on Mount Sinai, would be given over to the craftsman, and he didn't make a mistake in any one of the patterns. For Moshe Rabbeinu to be able to take what he saw on Mount Sinai and to give it over to the craftsman in a way that it was flawless, that took what we call Mesiras Nefesh. That took a tremendous amount of self-dedication. It wasn't easy for Moshe to do that. It took a lot of self-dedication, self-sacrifice even, to be able to give it over in a way that he could give over exactly every pattern to the craftsman without any mistake. It wasn't an easy thing to do. It took a lot of devotion, a lot of dedication. V'chein matzina b'David. And therefore, Rashi is saying, you know why it's called, why is Moshe Rabbeinu the only one being mentioned here as the one who constructed the Mishkan? Because Masar Nafshay, because he showed self-sacrifice, tremendous self-dedication and devotion to do his part, which was to teach the craftsmen what exactly to do, and he did it based on what he had learned on Sinai, and he did it flawlessly. V'chein matzinu b'David, and we find the same thing by King David. Again, David was tremendously dedicated for the purpose of building the temple, the Beis HaMikdash. Now we know it was King Solomon, his son, Shlomo HaMelech, his son, who built the Beis HaMikdash. But David HaMelech wanted to, but he was told through a prophet of God that he can't. But that didn't stop him being able to do as much as he could to basically set the foundation, to set to put everything in motion, to actually set the place and find the place and purchase the place where the Beis HaMikdash would stand. Where do we find that David HaMelech dedicated himself, sacrificed of himself so much for the purpose of building the Beis HaMikdash? Shenemar, as it says, Zachar Hashem LeDavid Eis Kol Unasai. Hashem remembered to David all his suffering. Asher Nishba La Hashem, that he swore to God. And he swore to God, if I enter the tent of my home, if I go upon the bed that is spread for me, if I allow sleep to my eyes, slumber to my eyelids, before I find a place for Hashem, tabernacles for the strong one of Jacob. David HaMelech said, I will find no rest. Literally, I will find no rest until I can find the place upon which the temple, the Beis HaMikdash, will stand. And because of that kind of Mesiras Nefesh, self-dedication, self-sacrifice that David HaMelech showed, Rashi says, we find that the Beis HaMikdash, although it was built by his son, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, nonetheless, the pasuk says, Re'ei Beischa David, see your house, David. It's called his house. And it's called his house because he was Meiser Nefesh, because he gave up, he dedicated of himself for that purpose. This word Mesiras Nefesh, which I'm translating as dedicated, means dedicated to the umph degree, dedicated to the fact of self-sacrifice. Look at what David HaMelech did. He was saying, I will not sleep. I will not go on a bed until I know there's a place for Hashem's house to sit on. And for David and for Moshe Rabbeinu to flawlessly give over the patterns that he saw on Mount Sinai to the craftsmen so that they should be able to erect everything perfectly, which was necessary. It also took a tremendous amount of self-sacrifice from Moshe's part, physical self-sacrifice, emotional, whatever it may have been. It had to take a lot of them. It took a lot out of him to do it, but he did it. He dedicated himself to do it. So both Moshe Rabbeinu and David HaMelech, they showed tremendous self-sacrifice for these buildings, and therefore we find here the Mishkan is called. The Mishkan is being completed by Moshe, and the Beis HaMikdash is called by the name of David. Okay, so now we have what Rashi tells us, that the dedication of Moshe is what now has the Torah giving him the credit for the building of the base of the Mishkan. But how do we understand that? How are we to understand that because of his dedication, we'll find the place where he gets all the mentioning, and the other ones who were involved also with dedication weren't mentioned? Apparently, they didn't have the same self-sacrifice as Moshe. But what is it about the fact that Moshe gave up of himself so much for his part in the construction that he's the only one being mentioned for it? So an explanation that's given is the following. And that is that any time we have a project that we're doing and we put together a plan and we do all the things necessary for the purpose of bringing this plan, this project to fruition, after all is said and done, and after we've done everything and everything seems to be in place, there still needs to be what we call a zechus kiyum, a merit to continue to exist. You cannot take it for granted that just because you've put everything together that would seem to say that now this can come to fruition and of course last. No one wants to make something that you build it and it falls down and it falls apart or doesn't get any kind of usage. When you bring it into fruition means it's completed and it can last and it can be able to accomplish what it's meant to accomplish. One cannot take for granted and say that just because I've put everything together that seems needed for this project to come to fruition and to be able to continue and to last and to succeed, you need a schus, you need a special merit for that. There's some kind of an unseen ingredient that must be there for the fruition to really come to fruition, that it could really have the effect that it's meant to have. That's what it means, the schus kiyum, the merit for its existence. There has to be some kind of another, there's another ingredient, there's another merit here that's necessary for it to be able to last. And the answer is that the merit that will allow a project to be able to have a lasting effect is what we call, and what we're discussing, mesiras nefesh, self-sacrifice, total dedication to something. If a person gives up from themselves for a purpose, that is the merit that will bring the success of the project. Of course, there's lots of work that goes in, and there's lots of planning, but there needs to be more than just the work, more than just the planning. That all has to come together. It all has to have with it mesiras nefesh, self-sacrifice, tremendous dedication, devotion, giving up from oneself, and giving up from oneself in order for this thing to come true. If a person just does, then he's done. Maybe it'll last, maybe it won't last. Maybe it'll succeed, maybe it won't. But if you want to guarantee or you want to make sure that your work will succeed, if you know there's mesiras nefesh there, there's real self-sacrifice and dedication for this project, for this service of Hashem, for this mitzvah, that is the schus, that's the merit that says all the work that you did, all the work that seems to be putting this all together will succeed. It will be able to last. The lasting effect of your project will come about. And that was Moshe, and that was David. The reason the Mishkan was able to not just be built, but to be able to have a lasting effect, the reason why the Beis HaMikdash was able to come together and last the way it did and have a lasting effect that it did. Of course, Shlomo HaMelech had to build it. And of course, Betzalel and Eliyav and their team had to build the Mishkan. But it was Moshe Rabbeinu's self-sacrifice, his mesiras nefesh, that gave the merit for it to be able to last and have a lasting effect. And it was David HaMelech's self-sacrifice that allowed the building of the successful building of the Beis HaMikdash to have its lasting effect. I'll share with you a very beautiful story now that fits this. And the story is told by Rabbi Yechiel Spiro in his book, Touched by a Story. And he tells the story of two brothers, Alfred and Sidney Gross. They lived in a small town in Pennsylvania called, I have to spell it for you, Duquesne. Duquesne. That's how I'll pronounce it. And there was not a very large Jewish community there at all. And these two brothers actually lost their father in 1922. And by 1941, which is when the United States entered World War II, they were two young, strong men that were raised by their mother with their siblings alone. She raised them alone. But she was a strong woman and a strong principled woman. And under her watchful eye, these two young men, although they really had very little exposure to a strong Jewish community, nonetheless, they were from religious Jews who went to Minyan every single day. Well, in 1941, after Pearl Harbor, the two brothers were drafted into the army. They were running a business. They had to close down the business. They went for basic training. Alfred was sent to Burma. Sidney was stationed in the South Pacific. And before they left, their mother, her name I got to mention, Sarah Gross, cried softly, and whispered a prayer to herself. And she said, Rebbeinu Shalom, the master of the universe, I'm sending away zwei Yiddish Kinderlach. I'm sending away 2 Jewish children. Please send me back zwei Yiddish Kinderlach. Please send me back 2 Jewish children. That was the prayer that she offered to Hashem before her sons went to war. Alfred was stationed in Burma, and most of the time, he was out of harm's way. His brother Sidney, on the other hand, had to deal with the Japanese soldiers, spent most of his time, surviving and dodging danger. And finally, the war came to an end. And Sidney and Alfred were coming home, and they sent their mother a message about the day that they would be arriving. And they made it known to their mother and to their siblings and to all the people in town. And they were all waiting for that day to come when Sidney would arrive. Now, on the Thursday before Sidney and Alfred were going to be coming on Sunday. And on the day before they came home, one of the children noticed that their mother was not eating. And when they asked her why, she simply explained that for the past 3 years, she has fasted every Monday and Thursday as a merit for her sons. 3 years she fasted every Monday and Thursday. Monday and Thursday are auspicious days for fasting. For 3 years that her children were away at war, she fasted for them every Monday and Thursday for 3 years. But the children said to her, they said, Mommy, the war is over. We won. They're coming home. Why are you still fasting? And she told them, children, I didn't fast so that we should win the war. I fasted because I sent away zwei Yiddish Kinderlach. I sent away 2 Jewish children. When I see that my zwei Yiddish Kinderlach, when I see that my 2 Jewish children have remained true to the traditions they were taught, then I'll stop fasting. Sunday came, Sidney and Alfred returned home, and their mother could see that they had remained strong and true to what they were brought up to live by. And that is when she saw that her prayers were fulfilled, that her 2 Yiddish Kinderlach came home. And eventually, this Sarah Gross merited many grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, all who are thankful for their Bubby's dedication, for her Mesiras Nefesh, for her self-sacrifice. Now, very often when I read a story, nobody knows, nobody knows for sure why something happens. I mean, clearly we know prayer helps, tefillas help, fasting helps. And therefore, we're definitely allowed to say and to believe that her prayers were answered. Only the Rebbeinu Shalom knows really what's going on. But we know that tefillah prayers help. And when we see they help, we have a right to believe that our prayers were answered. Well, based on what we've been saying, we see something else. We don't just see prayer here. We see Mesiras Nefesh. We see a tremendous amount of self-sacrifice and dedication. 3 years fasting every Monday and Thursday while still raising children in a home as a widow. That was true Mesiras Nefesh, true self-sacrifice. And we can say that was the schus kiyum, that was the merit, that her children should last, to have a last for her, the way she raised her children, for that to have a lasting effect, and to have that effect continue to last under very difficult circumstances while her sons were at war in the army. For that kiyum to have that lasting effect, for everything that she did, for it to last, the merit for it to last was her Mesiras Nefesh, her self-sacrifice. That is why she saw the nachas that she saw. And the lesson for us is that anything that we do, if we wanted to see the lasting effects and the lasting success of what we do, if we do it with Mesiras Nefesh, if we do it with self-sacrifice, that'll be the merit for success and for a lasting effect. If we raise our children to live a life of Torah with self-sacrifice, with sacrificing of ourselves, with giving up from ourselves, as difficult as things may be, we give up so that our children should be able to be trained to live a life of Torah. That Mesiras Nefesh, that self-sacrifice, will be the schus kiyum, the merit of lasting success of all the efforts we put into our children. And then we'll have true lasting nachas. Have a wonderful and beautiful Shabbos.